We will be enabling the audio for all commissioners for the duration of the meeting, and we're asking all of you to please mute yourself to avoid background noise if you're not speaking. And you may use either the raise hand icon or speak directly into your mic if you'd like to contribute to the meeting. And to all participants, you are muted on entry, and the moderator will enable audio for participants during the public comment period. We're also asking that if you have registered for public comment, you will be called on in the order that you registered for comment. And if you did not previously register, you may still register. During the meeting, the registration period is open until 3 p.m. And the other instruction is if you're dialing in via phone during the meeting and don't have access to a computer, you can text your desire to offer comment. There is a number here, 646-763-2189. And when you text that number, you will be put on the queue for public comment, and we'll call on the dial-in participants by name in order that the text was received. You can also enable closed captioning under more options, which is the 3 dots on your screen, and you may click on the option for closed captioning there. So just to know for myself, has anyone signed up for comments in advance, Francis?
Not at this.
No. Okay. Thank you. So I think we can stop screen sharing for a moment. Well, okay, yeah, and then we'll go back to that. So I wanted to just start off by asking if everyone received the materials for today's meeting.
Yes.
Okay. And we can start with attendance. So I'm actually going to, in this segment, want to welcome a new commissioner that we have, Michael Moffett, who's a main role appointee. So I would love for you to please introduce yourself to everyone, and then I'll go through the attendance, and you'll be able to, through that way, connect names to faces and say hello to everyone. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Saeed. I really feel honored to have been appointed by the mayor just recently, which was yesterday, and begin serving. I have been a strong advocate and supporter of the Civic Engagement Commission when it was first proposed. As a publisher, I strongly endorsed and I actively engaged, making sure that it got passed as one of the charter amendments. Few people may know me who are on the commission, but I go back, unfortunately or fortunately, for over 50 years of civic engagement in New York City. I'm a New York City born and bred resident, educated in the public school system and Queens College and graduate school at NYU. I was a teacher back in the late 60s and early 70s in a vocational education program. And I worked at the UFT during that time when the 18-year-olds got the vote. And I ran for the United Federation of Teachers, their voter education and registration programs when they got the vote. And we registered over 30,000 new students during those early years prior to the 1972 presidential election. I've been involved in many things. The significant ones have been publishing, where I was involved with ownership of over 30 papers in New York and Washington and Long Island for many years until we sold the last of our papers 3 years ago. But more important, I'm involved in civic activities, particularly focused on discrimination issues, particularly when I was president of the American Jewish Congress for the region. And we fought very hard historically against hate crimes and advocated for the passage in New York State of that legislation, which led me also in the 80s to help produce and involve in a very significant movie that's applicable to today, called Who Killed Vincent Chin? It was the first federally charged hate crime in America in the mid 80s. And I was the producer of that movie. And I was involved prior with the Asian community, which is very timely today, to get the federal government and the Deputy Attorney General at the time, Bradford Reynolds, under Reagan, to prosecute the first crime against an Asian American who was Vincent, who was murdered in Detroit on the eve of his wedding. And I think that's an important movie that people should see because it's a documentary, by the way, that was nominated for Academy Award in '87. But I've been involved in government on the local level as well as in the city. And I'm very happy to have joined the commission and please take advantage of my resources and age of historical understanding of what the Civic Engagement Commission is doing. Because years ago, the community boards were all under the jurisdiction of the mayor. And we helped create the district service cabinet and engaging the community involved in decision-making. And this at my is a joyful occasion of participating once more. So I thank you and I thank the mayor for the appointment.
Welcome.
That's the short end of it.
Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Okay, so Dr. Saeed is having some technical difficulties. She will also be restarting her WebEx and computer. So I'm going to call attendance today. I can see. All right, so we'll start with Amy Breedlove.
Here.
Thank you. Chuck.
Here. By the way, Mark, your assistance helped. So Dr. Saeed, shut down and restart. I don't know what I did, but it worked.
Mark.
Limited though I am, I'm here.
Eve.
Here.
Thank
Oh,
you.
there she is.
Jose.
Here.
Thank you. Lilium.
Here.
Anastasia.
Hi, sorry, it took me a few seconds to unmute. I'm here.
Okay, no worries. Murad. No, Murad. Aneta. No, Aneta. Donna.
I'm here. I'm here. Welcome, Michael.
Okay. Anthony. Lori. I think that's about everyone. I'm gonna give Dr. Said a few more minutes.
Francis, can I ask a quick question? I heard today that the mayor has told all city employees that they're coming back to the office on May 3rd. Is that correct?
That is correct. I wonder if Leslie is in the meeting. I believe Leslie Brown, our chief of staff, will be facilitating that return.
I'm on, Francis.
Okay, you're good. Okay. Do you want to speak
I'm
to it?
on the phone. Just that we've been given guidance by the Department of Citywide Administrative Services and the Restart Task Force. So all agencies are going through that guidance to determine the best way to come back. and informing, agency staff of the intention to restart. So considerations around both space, sort of the both space, the equity considerations, and impact on like operational programming.
So does that mean the possibility may exist that our May meeting, which is the end of the month, may be in person?
I don't believe that decision has been made yet. I would defer to Dr. Saeed on how we'll move forward on that. In all likelihood, considering the space in our office and we don't have a hearing room, I would think we may continue in the same module we're in now, just
Okay.
to be consistent with social distancing guidelines.
But but also, if I may add, we're not legally employees of the city of New York. We still have to observe
Correct.
social distancing, and this is a large group that includes a public session. I work in a
Correct.
hospital
Which is
setting,
why I
and
was saying
that's
we don't
not.
have a space where we can follow those guidelines. I would
Correct.
imagine it will remain virtual. Yeah.
Our gatherings are still limited to a certain number of people in a room.
Correct. Correct. Yep. The occupancy limitations are a consideration for us when we return or any space we're in. That's accurate.
Thank you all for that clarification.
Sure.
If I know that we are not officially started, right? But I wanted to express a concern that I have today. I don't know when we scheduled this meeting, we were aware of the special elections that are happening today in my own district here in the Bronx. And I am very upset that this is not something
Hi,
to
everyone.
take in
Can you all hear me?
consideration. We can hear you. We can't see
Can
you.
someone say something so I can see if I can hear you?
I'm speaking. I don't know if she can
Yeah,
hear us.
I can't hear. I'm sorry about this. I probably have to call into the meeting. In the meantime, oh, people are speaking. Thanks for someone sending the text. Okay, I will put myself on mute. Francis, have you already taken attendance? Just please nod your head. And I think the next thing on the agenda was for you to present the language access plan. So why don't you go ahead and do that? And for awareness, we will need to vote on this so that it can be posted or shared with Moya and posted online. So we'll take a vote after your presentation.
I guess I'll raise my concerns later, but it's very disturbing because this time I could be engaging and making sure people are getting out to vote. It is extremely low turnout. So I'm really worried. And, our efforts right now should be to try to do our best to make sure that our civic society is, exercising the right to vote. So this should not happen again is my recommendation.
Thank you, Lily. I think we can return to this topic once Dr. Said has dialed in via phone. In the meantime, I'm going to share the updates to the language access plan. So give me a second while I share the screen.
Francis, while you're getting settled, this is Leslie Brown again. I just wanted to clarify that to your point, Lillian, we are not having public meetings at this time. I just to get clarification on that. I'm going to make sure that that was clearly stated to your folks. So thank you for that question.
Just to quickly review the agenda for today. So I will, in the interest of time, try to move the language access plan updates as quickly as I can, leaving some time for questions. Then we will move on to the discussion on the task force on racial equity and inclusion. So Dr. Said will go into more details about what that looks like and the CEC's responsibilities with that piece. Okay, so the updates that I've shared via email on the language access plan are, let me make sure everyone is on mute. Thank you. Okay. Just making sure that the commission is taking into account the vendors and the technologies that are being used in the provision of language services. Now, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs is responsible for ensuring that all city agencies and mayoral offices have a language access plan in place. And this, for the fiscal year 2021, they have made updates on requiring agencies to explain how they are adhering to plain language requirements, how the provision of language services are incorporated into agency procedures. And the interesting piece of, well, not interesting, a very focal component of the language access plan this year is emergency preparedness. So getting a better understanding of how mayoral offices and city agencies are handling the current pandemic and the virtual outreach. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, but I just want to emphasize that the language access plan, the updates are focused more on the vendors that we're utilizing and the types of technology. So I'm going to stop sharing and reshare the language access plan. Okay, so to start off with the goals for last year, last fiscal year, we set goals on the protocols for internal staff on how to request translation services and interpretation services for outreach events done in the community, including American Sign Language. We did establish, and you all voted on our plan on how to implement for CC staff to request. So we created a toolkit that ensures the kind of a timeline that all staff should follow when conducting outreach to limited English proficient communities. We've contracted interpretation and translation vendors this year. So looking towards this year, we're actually in the process of contracting Erickson Translations. Erickson Translation is a local MWBE vendor. This is different from the citywide contracted services that the city has for agencies. We're moving in this direction because of the vendor's knowledge of local New York dialects. This was especially helpful to the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs when we were doing the public service announcements for the Pole Site program. We were able to identify the services that were more aware of the dialects spoken in the Yiddish community. So that was very helpful. Some of the interpretations or translations that we were using were not plain language, and the vendor has a experience in working with local New York City populations. Training CEC staff, all CEC staff were trained during our team meetings, and they are encouraged to attend our language access meetings. So if there are upcoming events that require translation or interpretation, or just a bigger planning on how we're going to provide an interpretation, they're invited to join those meetings. And this has been especially important in trying to provide interpretation services in the virtual space. So understanding the requirements and the technology that is needed, and factoring in also just ample time for us to assess how they can join either via computer or through cell phone. So the Mayor's Office, we've been working collaboratively with the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs to provide a toolkit. And this toolkit for how to do interpretation in the virtual space will also be provided to community boards. We've relied heavily on the community and ethnic media to target community populations for our Pole Site program. So we contracted also an MWBE to target, based on zip codes, advertisements for our Pole Site, which we'll continue to do as we go on. But our focus for Pole Site and language provision will be targeted to community organizations, especially those communities that make up a larger population of our services, such as Haitian Creole and Russian. So the LOP population assessment remained the same. What is changing, as I mentioned, the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs has incorporated or wants more information on the types of vendors that the agency is using. So for translation services, for the first half of the fiscal year, we actually work with the Mayor's Office Language Services team to create PSAs and have those translated. And the reason why we did that information with them, in partnership with them, is due to their quality assurance procedure. We like to have a review process when we receive translations from the vendors that we work with. Moya then adds another layer of quality assurance, making sure that the translations are plain language and ensuring that the words that we're using actually make sense. And I know this sounds silly when we say make sense, but a lot of terms like civic engagement may not have a direct translation in the language. So the Mayor's Office language services staff helps us assess, whether that information is accurate. Another step that we're taking for our translation services is creating, and we mentioned this before, a style guide. So creating a list of program language terms and services and translating that to a point where we standardize all translations by using that same term. So we give this style guide to the vendor, and the vendor uses it as a point of reference to translate all our materials. Okay. So interpretation services, we contracted, the city's contracted vendor Language Line to provide interpretation service, over the phone interpretation services. So all CEC staff have Language Line available. And this service was also made available to community boards. And the service was made available to community boards, as you know, for free. It's available 24/7 in over 200 languages. For the Pole-Site Language Assistance Program, our interpretation contracted vendor is actually the big word. The big word provided interpreters for the Pole-Site program. And the way that we targeted information or the dissemination of information to community boards, as mentioned, we utilize the Pole-Site zip codes to target community, LEP communities in those languages. So we turned out advertisements in Russian, Arabic, based on the zip codes. Okay. Now, language access and agency communications, this is more operations. How does the agency, for example, put out information to the community on their websites or our CEC website or about public meetings? So we're looking specifically this year to making sure that our press releases, as we're trying to build community knowledge around our programming, ensuring that our press releases are translated. This is something that we did not do in the last fiscal year, so we're looking to changing that practice and translating the press releases that we moving forward. Another currently contract that we're working to finalize by the end of March is SmartLink. So SmartLink Translation Services is a localized translation tech company. So to explain further, when someone visits the CEC site, our government site, usually the translation that is available is done through a Google widget. So Google, as I mentioned before, is not the most accurate translation. It sometimes will translate things verbatim, so or literal translations of words that does not really work. So SmartLink is a company that creates a localized page. So if I speak Cantonese and I click on Cantonese, it will create a completely separate page in Cantonese using the translations from our vendor. So it does not rely on Google, but it creates a page that is accurately translated and translates. And it's easier for New Yorkers who do not have access to a desktop and mobile device to use that piece. So SmartLink is, will make our digital translations better, and it's a technology that we're looking to integrate into the Participate NYC site. Our goal for Participate is to serve as a hub for New Yorkers to connect to one another and provide feedback on the participatory budgeting process. So this technology, SmartLing, is something that we're really excited to have in our as a part of our resources for language translations. And I encourage you, I'll send a follow-up. I will send you more information on what the SmartLing looks like. It's very difficult to talk about it without seeing it in action, but I will send a few links for you to review this technology that we're using to translate. For plain language is very important. We try to ensure that any collateral that we create for our programming is from the start plain language so that the translations are more accurate. We do follow the federal government's guidelines on plain language, and we attend the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs annual language access training to make sure that we're up to date with all the requirements and the best practices for translation. An important aspect of this information is, or part of plain language is standardizing our process, ensuring that we're using the tools that will make it easier for the vendors to translate our materials. So a piece of that is just Adobe Creative Cloud and having consistent communications with the vendors. If there are any changes that need to be made based on community feedback, we do utilize the Language Assistance Advisory Committee to offer feedback on the information that we're translating, pre and post translation. Policy and procedures, how are we making it accessible for New Yorkers to know about our public meetings? We do follow the city's open meeting law, so posting on the city record, the commission website, connecting to community and ethnic media, providing connecting with community resources and free press to advertise our meetings. Notification of free interpretation signage. So this is the commission, as you all know, provides translation and interpretation services in additional languages. So Italian and Yiddish are included as our additional languages. But this past fiscal year, we've been working collaboratively with our partner mayoral offices, Immigrant Affairs, Democracy NYC, to provide information in other languages. And just to backtrack on the SmartLing piece, SmartLing, we're going to focus on providing this localized translation in our 12 languages, but we will continue providing the Google widget for those additional languages. So emergency preparedness. Now this is, at the start of the pandemic, we consulted with with council on the best way to proceed with conducting virtual meetings. What constitutes civic engagement in the virtual space? How do we ensure that folks are able to participate? A part of that has been working with the Department of Health and Mental Hygiene to ensure that the work that we do on the ground and the work that we're doing with our partner agencies reflects the city's guidance on the best practices. But we're also trying to integrate kind of the emergency aspect of communicating vital information to our communities by integrating it into the scope of work of our translation vendors. So prior to fiscal year 2021, we didn't have the fast turnaround or the rapid response element into our translation vendors. But now that we're reviewing our contracts with Ericsson, we have asked in the scope of work that they include a fast turnaround of less than 24 hours for critical information. We're integrating that into our budget as it is a higher cost to receive translations in less than 24 hours. But this is something that Ericsson Translation has done well and has been responsive to the needs of the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs and also our poll site needs in the prior year. And this is, as Dr. Shane will explain further, we're hoping to utilize the rapid response translation services of our vendor in the initiatives that we'll be rolling out in the coming months. Any questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to move on just to,
I just have one question, if I may.
yes.
You mentioned the 12 critical languages that are being used. I don't know who decides that, but when a ethnic community gets to be very large and impactful in a area, to add another language, how is that process? And I use Chinese because we have a large Cantonese and Mandarin, but in Sunset Park, we have a large Fukienese population. That's the fastest growing Asian population from China. And Fukienese, may not understand certainly Cantonese, but they would Mandarin.
Yes, so just to clarify, thank you, Michael. We utilize the city's official 10 languages. So the city conducted a data evaluation on the top most spoken languages. So they determined using both census data and Department of Education data, they've landed on 10 official languages. Our additional 2 languages are based on our poll site methodology that we've utilized to assess what additional languages we would provide interpretation services for our poll site program. I will invite Gagan Kaur, who's our advisor on language access, to provide further information on determining or how do we use our methodology to come to that number.
Absolutely. Thank you, Francis. Hi, Michael. My name is Gagan Kaur. Just as Francis stated, we come to the 10 city languages from ACS, American Community Survey data, and Department of Education data to determine those top 10. CEC serves Yiddish and Italian because Yiddish and Italian, in terms of concentration of speakers, outrank the lowest ranked citywide language, which is Urdu. So on the census data, Italian and Yiddish have more speakers than the lowest ranked language, which is why we serve Italian and Yiddish. To serve additional languages under the Poll Site Language Assistance Program, they would just need to meet that same metric, which is outlined in Chapter 76 of the City Charter. So if other languages have more speakers with limited English proficiency than Urdu, we would additionally serve that language as well. And when it comes to different dialects of certain languages, we currently provide interpretation in Chinese for Cantonese and Mandarin. But if we were to understand that these data in the American Community Survey outlines dialects that have additional speakers, we would add interpretation in those additional dialects of Chinese as well.
Thank you.
Of course, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Gagan. So very quickly, the last piece that our implementation plan logistics is integrating the localized translations, so smart links. So integrating into our government website, we've gone through the very long process, our cybersecurity of integrating the localized translation. So we're hoping to have that, like I said, completed. We just finished the cybersecurity review for our smart link, and we'll proceed now to creating a plan on how we will manage the translations and a lot of the operations piece that goes on in the background of implementing a new technology such as SmartLink into our city website. We're also looking into, like I said, integrating into our Civic digital portal, so Participate NYC. So that's going to be very important as we try to encourage more participation from LAP communities into our Participate website. And then another point that Gagan has been working on is how do we, for the remainder of the fiscal year, conduct community workshops with LAP communities, with important community-based organizations. So we've had an Urdu workshop on RCV. So we're in the process of translating our PowerPoint. So all the collateral that we're using, it's important that we present information in a translated language so there's understanding and follow-up. So Gagan has been working on the outreach materials for our ranked choice voting education. And for the remainder of the year, we'll share a calendar of workshops that we'll be offering in Haitian Creole, Russian, Polish, and we're looking to offer them also in Yiddish. And this are, we have arrived at these languages based on the poll site partners that we've worked with and seeing where we could do more to ensure that there's more, there's participation from the Haitian Creole community, the Russian community, and the Yiddish community. Gagan, do you want to add anything else to that piece?
I think the one piece that I would add is that we are partnered with Democracy NYC and Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. They've also been doing additional workshops in other languages, such as in Spanish and in in Bangla. So we're also looking at what other resources exist from city partners, so we're not doing duplicative work. In addition, we're recording these workshops and meetings so that they may be used as a resource after the workshops are conducted. The workshops will be, or meetings will be multilingual. So we'll have either consecutive or simultaneous interpretation. So when folks watch the content later on, they're able to understand the content in both English and the target language as well. And we're really excited about that.
Thank you, Gagan. So I'm going to open the floor for questions. Oh, I see, Amy, you had a question about, oh.
No, that's for later.
Yes, I just noticed. Okay. I actually do want to say something in the emergency preparedness. We've incorporated safety measures, including PPE for interpreters. So that is something that we work with the Department of Health to ensure that the interpreters and staff who work during elections are aware and provided with the right conditions to work. Okay.
So, thank you, Francis. Can everyone hear me? Okay.
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Amazing. Okay, great. I think I had to switch my device altogether. So I hope this works all right. All right. So we are going to need to vote on this plan. So you saw the edits that were made to it and the additions. So I was wondering if we could move forward with that vote. Is there a motion to approve the updates to the language access plan?
There didn't seem to be any questions or discussion, so I move to approve the amendments as so put forth.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
I was muted. I'm in favor.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So I think everyone approved, so we can go forward and consider the language access plan approved for sending to Moya and for I guess pending Moya's approval to post to the website. I realized something in this stuff, the snafu that happened with my computer stuff. We didn't actually approve the minutes, and we were going to present something on the coalitions that we are working on. The Task Force for Racial Inclusion and Equity, that is next on the agenda. So I'd like to propose that since Jordan Stockdale, who is the director of Young Men's Initiative, is here with us, to help with that presentation, that we can start with that and we will come back to the minutes if that's okay with everyone.
Sure.
I don't know if we need to vote on a change to the agenda,
No.
parliamentary procedure wise. Okay, so,
Your prerogative as chair.
okay, thank you. So we're going to talk next about the coalitions, as I mentioned. The Task Force for Racial Inclusion and Equity is a task force that we have talked about in the past in prior meetings. This was a task force that was formed early on to address the inequitable impact of COVID-19 on poor working class New Yorkers from communities of color. And what the city did was form an interagency task force to harness all the different, programmatic strengths of different agencies to help create a more equitable response to the pandemic. And I previously served as a co-chair for the COVID Healthcare Response Subcommittee with Dr. Torian Easterling. And now I'm currently serving as co-chair of the Stakeholder Engagement Subcommittee with Jordan Stockdale, who's the director of YMI, as I just mentioned, and he'll be helping me walk through the presentation that we have with about this, and it's one of the several initiatives of the task force, actually, and it is a project to build neighborhood and strengthen neighborhood coalition work. So I'm going to turn to Jordan to introduce himself, and we'll share with you an overview of the project.
Hi, everyone. My name is Jordan Stockdale. I'm the Executive Director of the Young Men's Initiative. For those of you that don't know, YMI is an office of the mayor that explicitly focuses on reducing racial disparities. And we do that through investing in and co-managing programs across education, workforce development, health, and criminal justice reform. So, as Dr. Saeed mentioned, the Task Force on Racial Inclusion and Equity is a cross-agency initiative designed to ensure communities hardest hit by the pandemic receive the supports they need. And the task force developed this idea of the neighborhood coalitions. So the diagram you see here shows how the task force relates with the coalitions and who will comprise the coalitions. So again, the neighborhood coalitions were designed to elevate and organize communities and to assist them in solving community problems, specifically those related to the ongoing pandemic. And they will consist of community members, community boards, tenant and block associations, other task force members from the Racial Inclusion and Equity Task Force, different community-based organizations, health providers, the criminal justice infrastructure, which includes the cure violence providers, MAP, the Mayor's Action Plan for Neighborhood Safety, local businesses, bids. It's a big tent that we're pulling together to help solve these problems. And these coalitions will be led by a CBO or MWBE, which will be the lead community organization that you can see in the diagram.
We can go to the next slide. So the vision for the neighborhood coalitions is primarily to serve as a space where there is vaccine test and trace education and access to bridging the equity gaps in neighborhoods for COVID response, because we want to support communities that are most impacted. And we'd also like this to be a space where we're connecting community members to appointments for vaccines as well. And even sort of like bigger picture, in strengthening neighborhood coalition work, which we know is already happening. The city is just looking to further support neighborhood cohesion, community building, resilience, and COVID-19 recovery, which will be helpful not just for COVID-19, as well as, but also other pandemics and health issues and emergencies. Hopefully we won't have too many of them, but the idea is to strengthen that grassroots connectivity. We can go to the next slide. So the way that we are considering the implementation or working on the implementation is that there will be 33 neighborhood coalitions in the 33 impacted communities that have been identified by the task force. And the coalitions will be supported by a citywide administrator, which will be an MWBE who will coordinate with the task force, and CEC, YMI, and the task force will be working with that citywide administrator. There will also be stronger engagement from task force member agencies, because what we're trying to do by creating this kind of mechanism is to have more timely resource and service coordination with the city. And coalition leaders from the neighborhood level will be asked to attend trainings, webinars, or meetings connected with their focus area. And they will also be meeting with us, with CEC and YMI, to share best practices, resources, and collectively problem solve on a monthly basis. And they'll be working with the MWBE to make sure that they're meeting their deliverables. We can go to the next slide. Jordan, I think this is you.
Oh, I was speaking on mute. As Dr. Saeed mentioned, so the coalitions will focus primarily on vaccine education and test and trace education at first, as well as community resource mapping and service coordination, and finalizing doing the needs assessments. And then the second focus areas will be the civic education and ranked choice voting education, and they'll help develop plans with the coalitions for hyperlocal education. Could we do the next slide? Okay, again, so this just shows phase 1 and phase 2 priorities. Again, in phase 1, the coalitions will be asset mapping, conducting a needs assessment to see what the actual communities feel like they need, doing vaccine education, test and trace education we've discussed. And then in phase 2, which will start at the beginning of the next fiscal year, the coalitions will be able to select from a long list of different potential focus areas that they believe are priorities for their own communities. So that could be connecting young people to programming, different community advocacy, emergency food response, mental health services, organizing support for small businesses, and the list goes on. This is also me, Dr. Saeed?
No, I'm just having technical issues today. So sorry. So I think I don't know if we went over the slide where, I think you already mentioned this.
I think you went back on mute.
Sorry. I think we talked already about the previous slide. I don't know if we went through just that we want to support and have a big tent, as you mentioned, and bring in as many entities as possible. For the timeline, I think this is you as well, Jordan. I'm so sorry. This is you, the timeline.
Okay, sorry. We have a few different versions of this presentation, so I'm just going back and forth here. Okay, so for the timeline, we announced the competition which is the RFI, the request for information from various CBOs and MWBEs previously, and we also conducted an information session in which about 130 different organizations attended. In mid-March, we will issue a solicitation for an MWBE that'll actually manage the process, including subcontracting with these CBOs of the various neighborhood coalitions. So there will be one MWBE that'll manage the whole process in tandem with the city, but they'll be helpful on the contracting end, which we needed assistance. In late March, the coalition coordinators will begin. They've already started applying, so we already talked about that. In early April, we'll select the MWBE administrator, who again will subcontract to the CBOs, the coalition coordinators. And then we will begin issuing the emergency contracts in April, May on a rolling basis, so that the CBOs can begin doing the work. In June, will be when the phase one deliverables, many of the phase one deliverables will be due. And then July, the neighborhood coalitions will begin phase two, which is actually selecting the various focus areas that they want their own coalitions to work on. Okay, so again, this is just a sample meeting schedule of the for the initiative. Month one, we would expect that the different coalitions would begin the community asset mapping and the needs assessment. They would participate in vaccine education and test and trace briefing, as well as begin developing the outreach plan. Month two, again, we're continuing with the asset mapping. We are going to co-develop a community vaccine and test and trace education plan with city health representatives, including DOHMH and health and hospitals. That's important to note because we don't want the coalitions to feel like they're doing this all on their own. They are working with, city agencies, including the CEC, right, to develop these plans. Month three, we're finalizing the community asset mapping. We're beginning to co-develop the plan, the ranked choice voting education plan, of course, with this body. And we are continuing to share, vaccine education and test and trace information. And then month four, which is the last month of the fiscal year for this initiative, we'd be sharing the deliverables, we'd be finalizing the needs assessment. We would select FY22 deliverables that we've already discussed. And we distribute the community asset map to members so that folks in the community know where all the resources are for their local community as well as for the city.
For the application, as was mentioned, this application was posted. I'm losing track of time. I think last week, and the applications for expressions of interest are due on the 29th. Similarly, the RFP for the MWBE citywide administrator was also posted, and those applications are also due. And we're asking for the neighborhood coordinators to, the RFI spells this out, but as part of their applications to submit their qualifications, the neighborhoods they'd be working in, the proposed coalition membership with a minimum of 8 coalition members, and a budget for phase one of the project, and then phase two funding will involve another budget submission depending on the priorities that are set by the neighborhood. And they also need to submit their 501c3 and or MWBE documentation with audit information. And these coalitions coordinators will be selected in tandem in conjunction with the citywide administrator. So it's almost like a two-phase process where they're submitting expressions of interest, and then we'll go back and work with the citywide administrator to finally select the neighborhood coalitions. I think that might be the last slide on this. Yeah, so we can take down the PowerPoint and just open it up for questions and discussion on this initiative. And Jordan, I know you have to head out soon, so appreciate you joining us today. And please, hopefully we can get some questions and you'll be able to help answer. But...
Yeah, for sure. Thank you.
So whoever has a question, yeah, Chuck, Appealing, I see one, and maybe we can use the chat to stack if you have questions. So Chuck, you're on now.
You have to unmute, Chuck.
Sorry, Mike. I guess this phase one, somewhere about $2 million budget for all these zip codes, somewhere plus or minus, and then double that. Whose budget that's coming from would be the first question. It's obviously not ours because it exceeds our allocations. And then the other question is, what is our role in this as far as advisory, as far as some of the input, or is there anything ongoing that we have to do with this process?
You want to start us off, Jordan?
Yeah, sure. So the majority of the money is from OMB and from the task force itself. It's all CTL, city tax levy. The Young Men's Initiative, we are allocating a certain amount this fiscal year, next fiscal year as well to support. But so it's mostly from the task force itself.
And the commission's role?
Yeah, clarify on the commission's role. As I mentioned, CEC has been part of the task force for racial inclusion and equity for some time now, as has YMI been. And agencies within the task force are taking on different kinds of initiatives for the city, for the task force. So CEC's role has been, along with YMI, to help shape this project. And then more specifically, once the implementation starts, we will be holding monthly convenings with the coalition coordinators to help, share best practices and support their work as they're doing the implementation, and obviously working in tandem with the citywide administrator. But this is an opportunity for the commission and also for YMI to just have we're the interface basically between the task force and the coalitions for the city.
So
That
we're
makes
not,
sense.
what I'm getting at is we're not lead on this, we're a participant and an advisory part to this.
I would say that we are lead implementers working with the MWBE. And so on like a more granular scale, we will not have, for example, staff who are
Right.
going, to like CEC staff. We might go to some of the meetings, but the coalitions are really meant to be on the ground, like with the leadership of a local organization. It's not a coalition that the city is running per se, but we're really trying to support the organizing that's happening on the ground to support vaccine outreach and implementation.
Thank you.
Yeah, just also note that as Dr. Saeed said, the task force members will also help with the management, and there will be agency leads for each of the coalitions, and so they will assist. They will attend the meetings and assist with ensuring that each of the coalitions receive the resources that they need or information that they need to be successful.
Right. We're calling it Adopt a Hub, and so we're looking at agency partners to attend the meetings as well. But in addition to that, there will be set into a communication process whereby if there are resource needs and problems that need to be addressed by city resources, we will have a communication process to hear about those and relay those to agency partners at the same time.
One more quick one. The task force will choose the MWBE.
Yes.
And then there would be, that chosen entity would be answerable to the task force.
Yes.
Thank you.
Next on the chat, I have Mark Diller.
Thanks. So of course, Chuck got to a lot of the questions I was going to ask. So thank you, Chuck. I guess my only other question is, it seems like this is a decision to pursue this process in this way that's already been made, and now we're being briefed on and talked inquired to about sort of the details of it. That's correct, right? The reason I'm asking is I guess my overriding concern is that this is another example of a couple of things that I've seen in city government in the last, I don't know, year or two, where a new need is identified and an urge or a push to create a new entity to address it is being formulated when existing infrastructure could be adapted to use it. I completely confess that in this context, I'm a hammer, so everything I look at looks like a nail. So as a member of a community board, and you talk about the need for a district needs statement and an assessment of needs and a coordination effort, that strikes me as what community boards are supposed to be doing. So I, at a fundamental level, I regret, if this is a decision that's already made, I regret that the decision was made in the way it was, because we're adding layers, by the way, probably adding expense, but certainly adding layers that will then be called upon to talk to one another. And I'm reminded of a software developer that I represented once, whose first inclination when a project was either over budget or behind schedule was to take team members off the team for fear that if they were spending, the reason they were behind was because they're spending a lot of time talking to one another, when they could actually be writing code or fixing problems. That's the spirit with which I approach this issue. It's a perfectly appropriate problem to try to solve, and it's a good problem for government to be solving. I just regret, if it is a decision that's already made, that we're adding layers where perhaps existing infrastructure could have done the same or better. Other than that, I may have other questions for you, but that's my overriding concern for you.
So just to start us off on that, just to respond to that quickly, it's true that this is a decision and a program that is going to be implemented. I think your concerns about how this new infrastructure interfaces with the existing one is really critical and important. And to reassure you that has been a part of the conversation that we've been having internally all along, is that we want to make sure that we are tying this structure to existing initiatives that are taking place on the ground, including community boards and including other initiatives from other city agencies, right? That's another sort of potential area where you could say there will be a lot of overlap. And that will be really crucial in the implementation to make sure that we're doing that. As far as the specific comment on, for example, the needs statements that community boards submit, I do believe this is another opportunity to bring more people into that process, right? And to make people more aware of it. So in doing a needs assessment as part of the COVID response, what we'd like to see is and share with the neighborhood coordinators the different resources that already exist in terms of communities identifying priorities. So CB needs statements would be included in that, as would DYCD, also does neighborhood assessments, and I'm sure there are other city agencies might be doing similar things. So we would share that with the neighborhood coordinators and making sure that community boards are connected into this space. I mean, it was very important for us as CEC to make sure community boards are connected to this initiative as well.
This is
it's
Donna.
not,
I have no way of raising my hand, but I want to go next.
Go for it.
Thank you.
Okay, Donna, you can go next. I see that Eve has a comment as well, and Mark, you may have questions, but Donna, go ahead.
Hold on one second. Are you hearing me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes,
I'm
we
on the
can hear you.
phone.
Go for it. Go ahead.
Okay, I see this as a duplication of services that are already there in some communities. My question is, how is this created before you've actually done the needs assessment? Because you don't really know what the needs of the community are. And like Mark, being on a community board, we have heard nothing about the task force on racial inclusion, and members keep asking, what is it? What are they doing? And we haven't heard anything about it, any policies or programs that have been set up. But now we have this, which is sort of like an overarching reach on a community, even though you are using resources from the community like MWBEs or community-based organizations. They're already doing this, most of them. So now we're going to have the city doing this spending money on things that have already been done, because for COVID, we've been in this for a year. So for this to start up now, communities had to have taken care of themselves all along and had to, I'm sorry, I'm outside, and had to create mechanisms like this by themselves. So is this a way to now fund those organizations by giving them city money and creating a city structure or something that's already happening? I'm so sorry. I'm still outside. Forgive me. New York is very noisy. So that's my, I'm looking at that in that way because I see it as a duplication of services. And I see that even though there's a RFI going out there, certain agencies that may or may not be doing this work are going to apply, and they may or may not get the job because they have all of the things that are necessary for that job, but they don't, the 501c3 and all of this, but they are not necessarily a good fit to do this job, and they haven't been doing it, but then they'll change just their resources to do it because now there's money involved in it. And I don't see it as being genuine, something that is really going to help the communities that I did see on the list, the different zip codes. Those communities are really suffering, and they don't need an extra layer of people coming in, even if it's not people that are in their community, because the people that are in their community are not necessarily helping them to begin with. I understand that this is already done, but I just need for us to take a closer look at it and to how do we monitor that it's actually happening, that it's supposed to be happening when the mayor is going to be leaving.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. I genuinely, I want to say that I so appreciate having these conversations with you all, and the points of view that you raise are really crucial for us to keep thinking about. And I think that the way that we're seeing this project is that the intention is to support the people who are doing this work on the ground already. And the effort is to try to support that work as well as build on it in order to make sure that we're addressing the equity gaps for COVID-19. Jordan, I want to be thoughtful of your time. If you want to add, again, I don't know when you need to leave, but if you want to add anything here, I welcome you to do that.
I would just say that the city has funded CBOs to do work, throughout the pandemic. The Young Men's Initiative, we've allocated, a ton of money towards mentoring organizations, education organizations, to food distribution. So, the city has done some work throughout the pandemic. I think, the concerns raised are really important. I mean, the initiative isn't in every place for a reason. It's in neighborhoods that have been most impacted by the coronavirus. I think there are significant disparities in the vaccine uptake rate that run along socioeconomic lines and race and class. And those are things we need to be mindful of. And if we can organize communities across different silos to ensure that everyone gets vaccinated, the world's a better place. And so, we're allocating some funding to do that, as well as other important, initiatives.
In an initiative like this, and particularly for anyone who has done, which is probably a lot of you have done coalition building work on the ground, I think there's a vision that we have of coalition building, and there's also lots of opportunities for things to get complicated. And so part of what we're going to need to do in implementing this program is to be as mindful as we can be and support the local organizing as much as we can. This initiative does extend into the next fiscal year and past this administration as well, and we need to also think about how it's, how it's going, and depending on that, to try to continue to support the coalitions over time. We've also been talking with our agency partners, including New York City Emergency Management and Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, because they have coalitions that they've been supporting for emergency management and response and community resilience as well, and trying to sort of, weave all these efforts together and work together to build these coalitions out further. So Mark, did you have another question, or should I go to the next person in the queue?
I will want to speak again, but why don't you go through the others first and then
Okay.
see
Thank
if
you.
they don't also have the same thoughts or whatever.
Thank you so much. Eve is next.
Thanks for that presentation. Appreciate that. And I think there's a lot of complexity to this. And I do feel like New York City is different from so many cities because we have this wealth. We have this huge network of community-based organizations that support neighborhoods in many ways, as well as community boards. So it's a difficult thing to navigate. But, I guess my questions were around, kind of reach versus capacity, because, I do think that community-based organizations are very important in connecting this city government more deeply, to communities than a community board necessarily can. Just because they have interest areas and affinity areas that deal with more immigrant issues, but I see this as a space where they should be working together, community-based organizations and community boards. And, with that in mind, I think there is a capacity issue, because there may be interested 501c3s who don't necessarily know how to do a needs assessment, or may not even have the capacity to do the application itself. So, I'm hoping that maybe there's built into the whole system some support for creating the application. And then, it struck me when we were talking about this that there's some very clear linkages to the comprehensive planning initiative that's going on right now too, because they're precisely the same issues that the comprehensive planning initiative is trying to deal with, is understanding where the gaps are in investment across racial, cultural, political, economic lines, and then drawing resources to those. So I feel like the work of the neighborhood coordinators could be attached to that.
That's a really great point. And we do want the CBOs to work with the community boards in this space and on the needs assessment and other the capacity building for the CBOs. For the applicants and selection of the coalition coordinators, given that we're operating on a very short timeline to respond to an emergency, we are asking that the applicant have a 501c3, right? That applicant could be a fiscal sponsor of another organization. That is maybe really strong and doesn't have it, but we want the applicant to be able to manage the contract with, on this program. For the needs assessment capacity building, we're going to definitely be supporting them with tools for how to do the needs assessment, how to do the stakeholder mapping, and it will be borrowing from material that other city agencies have been using as well in this area. And also on the planning work, I think we can keep talking about how we can connect the dots on that. I'm looking at the clock and also wanted to check if we have anyone who signed up for public comment, Francis.
No, not yet.
Okay. So the next person in the queue was Michael.
So this is for Jordan as others. When I looked at the time frame that you presented, particularly in month 3, in terms of ranked choice voting, I'm not sure. And if month 3 is May or June, I believe, I don't know how you implement a program for the voting in June to begin the program when you have an election coming up citywide, whether it be days or weeks. I'm just concerned about the whole concept of implementing RCV and making it truly participatory when the last couple of elections and the ones that's going on today, knowing that special elections always will have a very, very low turnout. Citywide election obviously could garner 10 times as many people. Even those 10 times may only be 20% of the population. How do you really be able to get the concept of what you are aiming for with the Board of Elections that I have a little faith in to be able to count the votes in a timely manner? The last election, the 31st in the Rockaways, took weeks to be able to, and that was a small election in one district. And you're going to have it citywide. And so is your time frame reasonable or realistic? And what can we do to make it better?
Yeah, no, thank you for that. So month 3 is May for what we're counting. So let me just quickly answer that in a few different ways. Number one, the vaccine education, test and trace is paramount. Save lives, more important than the election, even though the election is incredibly important. So we have to do out of the gate. We have to do vaccine education because that's how you save lives and get the city back to some level of normal. Number 2, we are also allocating, we haven't announced this publicly yet, but $175,000 towards ranked choice voting education. So that's happening at the city level. And so that's $100,000 for outreach, $75,000 on education. And that's just one component of, I imagine, several other agencies doing the work. And so that's another route. In addition, if we're just talking about this here, this initiative, in May, the coalitions would begin formalizing their plan, and then the CBOs would be charged with training a specific number of people on what ranked choice voting is, and the members of the group in general are of the coalitions are people with their own constituents. This is the important piece. So you have the Cure Violence groups. They can go back to all their Cure Violence members and tell them, what the process. Same with the community boards. Same with, some of the other, I can't think of all the members we had for these groups, but they each have a group of constituents that they can do the train-the-trainer model so that what's discussed and what the folks learn in the coalitions then spreads throughout the community at a quicker pace. So that, Dr. Saeed, I know you had there.
If just say something, Jordan, 175,000 is like throwing a handful of sand against a tsunami.
Very true.
We have independent expenditures throughout the city for this coming elections that are probably going to be in the tens of millions. I would like to see, whether it be this agency or others, collectively ask the business community and even labor to put together an independent ad campaign to educate the people of New York. 175,000, the way you're dividing it up, could maybe be spent someplace else. And if you can ask the business community and other organizations to contribute to a citywide education campaign that could be run by some reasonable ad agency or group, you'll get the message out in a larger frame in the multiple of languages. 175,000 is not enough to be able to print the message where you want to go, let alone activate it. So I'm just wondering if there's another way to support what you're doing by expanding the coalition of participants and the financial resources that could be made available if the mayor and others ask the business community and others to participate.
Michael, thank you so much for that. I think we definitely agree that there's a need for citywide, education in this space for sure. And I think I totally agree with you that what we're doing here is really a drop in the bucket. I mean, if you think about the coalitions, um, you know, we put out the RFI and the RFP, and we are not expecting 33 coalitions to onboard all at the same time. It's going to be a highly tailored schedule that will vary across communities. So we're going to have to really, if there's an art and a, I guess it's an art and a science kind of metaphor, but really tailoring the work of these coalitions specifically. And as Jordan mentioned, we really want to prioritize the vaccine education, making sure people are getting access to vaccine appointments and getting vaccinated. And we're going to make a, you know, strong push on the RCV. This is in tandem with the funding that Jordan was just discussing, as well as other initiatives that the CEC and Democracy NYC are a part of to continue to educate communities. Just recently, we did a roundtable with the Urdu speaking community, for example, to help promote RCV education through in Urdu. We'll be working on that with other language communities. In addition to that, there are other non-city, city agencies will also get involved in this space, trying to share materials with their, with their communities. Moya is already active here, and we'll be working with other, NYCHA and DIFTA and others as well. In addition to that, there's non-city efforts that are happening. Rank the Vote, other, funders are involved in this space as well, to try to promote more education. So I think there's a lot of room for us to do more, for sure. And I think that the issue is like, how do we coordinate? Who is the entity that coordinates it all together? Like what's happening from the philanthropy sector, the business sector, the city sector, and then there's like the education sector as well. And we didn't mention at all the Campaign Finance Board, and the Board of Elections. They're doing their education work as well. And I think CFB is the primary entity here. And what we were looking to do through the coalitions is bring training from CFB and Democracy NYC into the coalition space, and also connecting them to the train the trainer work that CFB is doing, so that coalition leads and partnering CBOs in these coalitions would have access to that training and can then in turn share with their communities. So I'm going to keep going on the questions. The next one is from Amy Breedlove.
I'd like to yield time to Commissioner Perez, who has to leave the meeting, to get in her comments.
Okay.
Thank you. I literally have 30 seconds. I have a very important meeting at 3:30. Just a few concerns. One, I think, Sarah, you were not on when I was expressing my concerns that today's election day, although it's not citywide, I think we as a body need to be a little bit more respectful of the fact that one of our main goals is to civically engage with individuals to vote that usually are disenfranchised. And for that reason, I like to propose officially that we never schedule any meetings or activities on election days. Two, related to the last discussion, I'll say, and I'll concur with Jose Hernandez, Commissioner Hernandez, I am from the Bronx, and I continue to see duplication of efforts, waste of funding, doing things where so many experts are trying to do that work. Public Access TV, the City of New York continues to message on COVID, continues to message with experts on hesitancy, vaccination. I mean, you name it. There's so much going on in that space. I think we need to focus. I think this body, again, I continue to want to find where we can really have an impact. And I think that if we jump on anything and everything that is formed as a reaction to an issue that or a matter that occurs, we live in the biggest metropolis. Things are always going to happen. So I think we need to reevaluate our priorities and concentrate on things that really are things that we can have an effect on. Elections is huge for me. Ranked voting is a big concern. I'm going to vote today. I have no idea if I'm even going to choose more than one. Guess what? I live in a multicultural community. Oh, I only got one mailer about how to vote. 1 week before the elections, in English only, full of words, without graphs, and I'm just really, really upset. I mean, you can hear it in my voice. And to Michael's point, welcome, Michael. We have a real important elections for the next generation of this city residents, and we will be electing our next leader, and people don't know how to vote yet. And talk about disenfranchisement and the role of this group. My apologies. It is not. It is not what I want to be serving on this commission for. I apologize, and I want to continue these concerns and conversation, but I got to jump. I hope I'm putting my frustration out to you, and please help me figure out how we can really better represent our communities, because I'm not here for self. I'm here for a community that continues to be poor, disenfranchised, sick, and you name it. Sorry I have to run, but just wanted to make sure I express myself before I left.
Thank you. Thank you, Lillian, for being here and for sharing those concerns. And agree with you. We'll revisit the calendar to make sure we're not going to hold meetings on elections. And I think definitely want to continue to have the CEC be a place that elevates the communities that have been most at the margins in terms of engagement. So we really have to keep talking about this, and we can also talk more offline with you as well, and maybe think about ways to build this topic into future conversations in our public meetings as well.
Thank you.
So thank you for sharing.
Thanks.
And then Chuck, I don't know if Chuck is still here. He had to leave. He put a question into the chat about our minutes, but I'll get to that, I guess, after. Francis, do we have anyone signed up for public comment? Yeah.
No, we do not.
Okay, so I'm just going to keep going on the questions if that's okay, and then reserve time at the end just to approve the minutes. So,
Can I go now?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Sorry. I mean, this is great work and clearly it's needed. So thank you for that. I want to just agree and enforce a lot of what my fellow commissioners have brought up in terms of process and duplication of efforts. I also want to bring in about metrics and how you are looking at success. And I see that there are 4 stages of payment. This strikes me a little bit like the PPP loans, where I will tell you, working with small businesses, there was so much conflicting information about what they needed to do to be in compliance that a lot of effort was wasted. And at the end of that, most banks just washed their hands of it and said, don't worry about it, just walk away, take your money, don't worry about it. So I'm concerned about how we're going to measure success as we move through it. And if we are not meeting success, then what resources need to be allocated quickly to help these CBOs get the work done on the ground? Because I fear that we're just going to plug along, the money's going to go out, and unfortunately, all the good work isn't done because it is a lot of work to do in a very quick time frame.
Jordan, do you want to start?
Yeah, so we're talking about the federal PPP. Yeah, that was very, very poorly designed. And this is not at all like the PPP, so that's a good thing. I want to just put that out there. But definitely hear your concerns on that, and the fact that it went through banks and the banks only went to people that there's so many issues with the PPP, who it went to, how it went to them. Yeah. On this program though, it is a contract that's mostly reimbursed, so that's accurate. But that's generally how the city contracts with entities, and so it's following quite normal procurement processes. I will say what is different is that we are trying to do this in a really, really short time frame. And that is because of the emergency that we're in, and it is an ambitious time frame, and there is definitely room for concern there. So I think that's totally right. But the procurement process is pretty normal. It's what we do with most CBOs. Yeah.
I think my concern then is really to go to the point about metrics and how you're gauging success as you move along the program, and then be able to quickly react and throw resources in when you see that, you know, it's not necessarily working, or you see a lag. And so what needs to happen in order to move this along successfully?
There will be actually an advance of 10,000 as part of the signing of the contract. And then what we'll be looking at is deliverables. The specific deliverables will include an asset map or a stakeholder map of a directory that they'll need to turn in. That'll be one of the first deliverables. Along within that package will also be a plan to do the vaccine outreach, as well as actually participating in a training about, you know, vaccine outreach as well. So we do think that that initial deliverable is something that is certainly hopefully achievable, and then we can build on that for the needs assessment and other parts after the needs assessment, because the initial round is 20K, but then there's another 40 that will be determined by the priorities set by neighborhoods. And just as a note there, what we're intending to do and why it's several more than one budget submission is that we really wanted to give communities an opportunity to, through this program, to voice what their priorities are and allocate funding based on what communities voice as their priorities, rather than us deciding what the priorities should be. So it's an effort to try to make it more participatory.
Dr. Saeed?
And the metrics is right. I think we started to think about the metrics, but needs to be further developed for sure.
If the priority is the vaccine, and that's what Jordan is saying, why, and the funding is so limited, not to water down the activities of the local groups by having them, you know, having to do multiple tasks. Why not take advantage of the time frame, which is the vaccine and the exposure between now and the summer is going to be the greatest? Why not just cut off the RCV program and have everyone just focus on the vaccine to make and lower the disparity of the vaccinations and focus on those communities, if that is the critical time frame? And if the FEC and the Board of Elections and who knows what, you know, candidates need to spend their own money, really, if they want to educate the voter to vote for them, you know, and we shouldn't be spending the money on that if the vaccine, Jordan, is the priority. And I don't know if it's too late to segregate that, but it's just a suggestion based on the conversation of what is more important than something else. I know I screwed up everyone's thought by throwing a curve. It's just the way my mind goes, that I look at the priority and the vaccine, Jordan, you're telling me that's really it. And I think the people understand that. And the Department of Health did a lot of money that was spent on TV to educate people about wearing a mask and getting vaccinated. And people are going to be just totally turned off who were spending money on voting. At least from the budget that you're expressing and the priorities. And I still believe that somebody else should take on that responsibility.
Yeah, thanks. Jordan, do you want to?
No, I think that's an interesting point. I mean, the vaccine is the most important thing. I do think, you know, to other commissioners' points, that we really do need to get information out about RCV out as well. And we are trying to do a lot in a short period of time, but I think you bring up a good point as well. So, yeah.
Okay, I think next on the queue, we went to Lillian. We already did. Jose, would you like to share your comments and concerns or questions?
Oh,
I see
was
what
just,
you wrote. Yeah.
yeah, I live in one of the zip codes that's targeted
Yes.
for this, and you know, even still till this very day, there's still not enough information out there. In NYCHA buildings, they plaster it on the wall, but there's no direct outreach to the people who live in the buildings. They expect people to walk by, stop, and look at the information on the walls, and there's nothing more. Like you should have that personal, contact with a person that's going to explain these things to you in your language and make you feel more comfortable about the vaccine, the coronavirus, the social distancing, and stuff like that. And since the beginning of the pandemic, my neighborhood has been just looked over, and that's why we have some of the highest rates of infection. And we were the last to get the information. And as far as the equity in the vaccines, um, I think the entire process the governor laid out, and it was ableistic and caring more about the economy than the actual people who could die from the vaccine. Like, I'm a person with a pre-existing condition, I have a disability and um, compromised lungs, and it started out fine, but somewhere things got lost when they started allowing the restaurant workers and taxi drivers to get vaccines before people with pre-existing conditions. And then the equity in the Bronx, I went to get my vaccine, and soldiers were turning people away when on the news it says that you can go to Yankee Stadium and make an appointment, and that had changed and no one informed the people. So it's just miscommunication, and everyone's just dropping the ball. And instead of encouraging people to get the vaccine, they discouraged them, and that person was turned away, probably not uh, going to go back to even try to get one. And just comments and concerns and disappointment over the entire process.
Thank you for that. Can you remind me which neighborhood you live in? Sorry.
I live in the. Where is it?
Or
I can tell you exactly. I'm right here.
oh, you don't. I mean, you don't need to look at the if you're looking
Haven,
at something. Okay.
Haven,
Okay.
Melrose section.
Okay. Yeah, I appreciate you sharing the gaps that you're seeing on the ground, and I think that's one way that everyone can help with this program is to continue to share what you're seeing on the ground. And we definitely need to, I mean, we're hoping that this coalition work will strengthen the city's responsiveness and our ability to reach communities in a better way through partnering more deeply with the folks on the ground who are doing this work. I'm sure it will not, we're going to do a lot of learning as we're doing this. So thank you for that. Are there any other questions? Because I think we covered everyone who might have had. We did. Mark, I know that you had. Mark, you had a question before?
I'm sure it's a question, although if I had to phrase it in the form of a question,
Or a comment, okay.
I could probably accommodate being a lifelong aspirant for Jeopardy without actually making it onto the show. So I guess the question part of it is, what I didn't see included in the silos that are trying to be united through this effort. And of course, my overarching concern is that we're just creating another silo rather than spanning them, is council members and their constituent service staff. And I'm going to proceed from what I understood Michael to be saying. I'm not sure. I don't want to put words in Michael's mouth, especially the first meeting. But this isn't a ton of funding. There's not a great deal of money to be had here. And so efficiency turns out to be really important. The test and trace core already talks to community boards, but I'll put the community board thing aside for a second and talk about council member constituent service staff, because especially in my district, which is not one of the ones that's on the target list, nor should it be. So I'm completely with you on that part of the priorities. But if you want to understand something about how to reach folks in NYCHA, how to reach folks who are not as likely to be reached through electronic media, for example, you go to the council member and the borough president's staff's housing outreach folks who are already on that on the ground. And so I see in the chat that there are some coordination efforts being highlighted, and that's great. I'm just wondering where the council member staff fits into all that, since they are already source of well-informed, granular information about who's who and who's where.
That's
Yeah.
really important, and I think we don't have anything saying that council members may not be. I mean, like there was an existing part of how this coalition idea also has developed is that there was a similar sort of coalition that was set into place up in Harlem, and elected officials were part of that. And in the stakeholder mapping and asset mapping activity that we'll be asking the coalitions to do, it's partly to map the elected officials that are responsible for that neighborhood and help connect the residents to those elected officials as well. The stakeholder and asset map directory is supposed to be shared with the residents of the neighborhood, and drawing upon, you know, all the different entities as much as possible to try to create a big tent is something that we are going to work with the coalition coordinators to do.
Okay, in the same vein of not reinventing wheels that are already round and rolling, the Get Food program developed broad reach into places where a lot of us don't have direct contact. So they were reaching homebound folks. They were reaching folks who were most vulnerable, oftentimes through networks of volunteers. It never ceased to amaze me that gazillions of dollars were spent, as they should have been, to provide food for folks who were otherwise going to go hungry during the pandemic, and that there was this infrastructure created. And then the truck arrives at a NYCHA facility where I went to help it unload it, but without a bunch of folks, many of whom are senior citizens and not in the best of health themselves, were then taking the food off, you know, as it was delivered from the truck and bringing it up to their neighbors, because that's who they trust to open the door to them. So again, the idea that there's capacity that I don't see, maybe it's here and I just don't see it. But if we're trying to get the most efficient link to the most serious issues of the next step, a heavy reliance on those who are already on that ground and covering that ground seems to be the only way to accomplish it. So I don't know if that's the Food Czar or the Get Food program, or whether it's the new COVID Czar. But again, I'm sort of worried that we're adding a layer that then has to talk to all these other layers that already exist. I've already made that point. Thanks.
If I may, Mark, you can put words in my mouth anytime, but I had the last word when I put my ink onto paper. That's at least I could control that. But you know, this city, and this is why this organization is amazing, but this city, in all the decades I've been involved in civic engagement, there's so many people on a block to block level that are doing so many things. I would not worry about duplication of services, because we can't do enough on different layers, whether it be in NYCHA programs or, you know, from the Upper East Side to Lower East Side to the Asian community, or just a small nuclear community that has an ethnic grouping. Those people are doing something within their community. My point earlier for Jordan and for the discussion of spending money that is a trickle, that doesn't have an impact, versus prioritizing what we're going to do, and vaccines to me is the priority. I'm just commenting on that because I'd love to figure out a way, which I'm thinking, of how to shake loose, leadership in the city to really, if they're interested in ranked choice voting, okay, and educating. There are many civic associations, whether it be Citizens Union or not-for-profits or labor, that are interested in making sure people are educated on that. But they don't have the capacity to deliver a vaccine where the city can do that, and we can help with that by identifying local communities. The vaccines is something that you don't have to explain, you just have to implement. Ranked choice voting is such political confusion to so many people that are used to voting one way or another. As was said earlier by one of the commissioners who left, she hasn't decided how to vote, whether she's going to rank it. And the politicians and who's
Sorry,
running
Michael.
has to
I'm really
decide.
sorry.
I'm
I have to kind of interrupt here because I think people are starting to leave, and I want to make sure that we take the time to vote on approve the minutes from the last meeting before we lose the quorum.
So I
Are we
move to
still
approve.
Second.
okay?
Aye.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Okay, I'm assuming that was an aye for approval. And we are going to hereby approve the minutes. So there was a note in the chat about the minutes itself, which said, did we spend 2 hours just approving minutes at the last meeting? And I wanted to remind everyone that the way we're recording minutes is just to record attendance and votes. And we don't typically on the minutes talk about what we discussed. So that's why it's written that way, just as a reminder. Okay, so now that we have done that, we do have about 7 minutes left. So I know that the participatory budgeting team did want to share with you the end of the voting process. So I don't know if Danielle and Wendy, are you still on the call? And could you might need to shorten your presentation. Would like to turn it over to you for that.
Isn't it WeFeed? Oops, sorry. Oh.
Sure, we're still here and can do
Thank you.
a condensed update to get you all out of here by 4. Great. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Wendy Trell from the Civic Engagement Commission, and we're happy to provide you all with an update on our process. It's our money, which is our demonstration project co-led by youth, empowering young people ages 9 to 24 to decide how $100,000 of our money, the Civic Engagement Commission's expense money, should be spent. Last time we presented on this project, we provided a quick demo of our platform, which is the platform we have been using to facilitate the process, participate.nyc.gov. So today we just wanted to provide a quick recap of the process, the core activities that took place, and highlight some of the results, particularly because we just completed the voting phase at the end of February and have our results in of the process. So just to, I know we're short on time, so just a recap of the process itself. We started with a needs assessment. We thought it was important to start with talking to young people about what they need, so we can be mindful when project ideas come up that we are aligned. Those project ideas could be aligned with what young people are saying they need. We conducted a lot of outreach, so in terms of our strategy to our agency partners and community-based organizations, including DYCD, Young Men's Initiative, Department of Probation, Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs, Mayor's Office of Criminal Justice, NYC Service, DOH, MH, DOE. So that was a really great opportunity for us to develop those relationships with agencies and then help us reach the CBO provider community, and did get their assistance in reaching out to LGBTQ youth, runaway homeless youth, youth with disabilities. And then as part of that outreach, we had about 80 organizations
signed up to be a part of our process and participate in some way, whether it's getting the word out through their networks or participating in a virtual idea generation sessions or submitting a proposal. And so that's sort of how we tackled outreach, and we also provided social media kits for CBOs to share out the information and the process as we went along. Just in terms of, again, outcomes, this process was youth led. We had our youth Coro youth fellows assist us with this process and co-design the process. We're still on slide one. Sorry. Whoever has control. I think we'll probably skip that slide. Anyway, so 32 sessions were held with about 400 youth across the city. And then the youth PB fellows took all of that information, condensed it, produced a report on the site. And then we invited community-based organizations to respond and present project proposals. We received 49 project proposals. That was actually like a lot more than we anticipated having. And they all met the criteria that we established in collaboration with the youth when we designed the process. The project requirements included making sure that they address the needs that the young people identified. And those include mental health, education, career, and just advocacy, hearing that that mental health matters, young people not feeling prepared for their futures, and then just wanting to be heard. So those project proposals had to address in some way those needs. We also required that all of the projects serve at least one high need community that we identified, which actually also overlap with the Task Force Racial Inclusion and Equity Neighborhoods. Out of the voting process, again, we had because all of the project proposals met the criteria, we didn't have a delegate committee. We didn't further narrow them down. Anything that met the criteria was on the ballot. We were a little concerned that that was a big ballot that's large for New York City and typical city council processes. Maybe it's 5 to 10, but they were able to sort by project and by borough, and they plowed right on through. They were not intimidated, from what I can tell, these young people, not to be underestimated. So we had 2,028 young people sign up. They created an account in Decidim. They voted. We required that they at least vote for 2 projects. They wound up voting for an average of 4. So they cast 8,068 votes in total. So we are now in implementation mode. We announced the awards of who was selected. And so I'm going to ask Daniela just to talk us through. Maybe Daniela, you don't need to go into the project and borough-based information because we're short on time, but just to really share who won. And let's talk really quickly about how we're going to be supporting the organizations through the implementation phase.
Yeah, absolutely. Francis, can you through the next slide? Hi, everyone. My name is Daniela. I'm an advisor at the Civic Engagement Commission. I'm going to walk you through quickly through the winning projects for this process. So the top 5 projects with the most votes obviously won the process. We had a mix of organizations, well-established organizations such as South Asian Youth Action and organizations that have never worked with the city before, such as Books Education Organization Learning and Life, Inc. So it was a good representation of different civic organizations that serve communities across the city. The Green Space Project is an education in schools project. They're aiming to build a garden rooftop, a garden in a high school rooftop in Brownsville. The second project is Recycling and Climate Change Project. So another green project aimed at recycling and cleanup activities, as well as climate justice education. The third project that won, Young Musicians in Training, from Quest Youth Organization, Inc. They are a career readiness organization. So they're matching young people that are interested in careers in music with well-established, artists in across the city. Peer mentoring for high school and college students. This was South Asian Youth Actions Project. They're doing, college readiness, after school program, matching college students with current New York City high school students. And finally, the final project, the Girls Circle, is a mental health project that aims to create an online space for youth of color, particularly women and girls, and they are going to serve a community in the Bronx. So you can see that the projects are well spread out. We have 2 projects in Brooklyn, 2 in the Bronx, and 1 in Queens. You can see the respective votes. The projects were also a mix of, CBO led and proposals, and then other CBOs really worked with their youth members, or they had youth leadership councils in their organizations help completely create the project. So it was a good mix of co-collaboration between organizations and youth. You can go to the next slide, Francis.
Yeah, I know we're at time, but just want to note that we really want to support. We want to both make sure there's accountability. There's been a lot of discussion, I think, in reflecting upon the city council process. People really need to know how the projects are going, how they're being implemented. But we also think it's important, particularly since we have some organizations who, are relatively newer or entirely voluntarily run, that we support them and that we work with them, and we work with their budgets, and we work with how they operate. And we also want to be able to have the larger, more established organizations support the smaller organizations and vice versa. So we're really excited to pull them together as a cohort, host monthly meetings, both support each other in how we're doing in the process, troubleshoot, collaborate, share practices, think about creative ways for us to report back. So it isn't just about metrics, it's all about the experience, and being able to tell that in multimodal ways through storytelling or video. The young people are really excited about that prospect, and so are the organizations. I think they're really excited to be able to enter into a space in that way. And then we also are excited to just pilot the feature that is on our platform that is very transparent and shows progress and progress bars, and be able to work with that, so that when we're in a position where we're rolling out citywide, we have some facility with that feature. So I think we're at time, but we really want to encourage folks to check out the projects that were submitted. It's a really neat mix of really creative ideas. And then also maybe see the video. We have our Youth PB fellows talking about the process, what it meant to them, what they learned from it, what they got from it. Just hearing it from young people, I think, is far more interesting than hearing Danielle and I talk about it, for sure. So those links are there on this slide, which I'm sure you all will have in your hands. So hope you can take a minute just to hear their voice and hear them talk about the process.
Thank you so much, Daniela and Wendy, and I'm so sorry that we cut your presentation short and that we didn't get to share a moment together to watch that video. We will send the link around so people have it. And since we're at time, I want to just say again, we'll look at the calendar for check the meeting dates for make sure that we are not doing meetings on election day. And in order to close the meeting, I do need to have a motion to adjourn the meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion to adjourn has been seconded. And is there any discussion? I'm assuming not. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, hearing none opposed, we will now adjourn the meeting. Thank you so
Thank
much,
you.
everyone. Bye-bye.